Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be all about the book Iron Widow. So basically a quick rundown of this book is essentially we have the main female MC who is trying to destroy how society has trapped women into this role of literal self-sacrifice to fight the common enemy of humans. That is probably the most simplest way to break down the main overarching subject without going too deep. That's like the one sentence summary that I would give people. To start off this review, I'm going to say that when I'm reading a book, I read it more or less on like a surface level and I just enjoy it a lot. And then after I'm done and I soak up all the information, then I start having questions pop up that should have happened when I was reading it. For a lot of the book, I really enjoyed it. I liked how the protagonist wasn't this really generic girl. I like that she didn't have to really rely on anyone. She was very like self-sufficient for the most part. And it was very obvious to see the restraints physically that society has put on her, with one being her feet were bounded by her family as she was a young child due to the beauty standards. They wanted her to be beautiful. That way they could sell both her and her sister into being pilots. That way her brother could have enough money to buy a wife. Fair warning, a lot of the earlier parts of this book are very frustrating to read. You get very, very angry at the family. So that was very hard. It took me a while. It actually took me quite a while to get into this book because I would read a few pages at a time and I would just get so frustrated reading the situation that the main character was in. I would have to put it down. I got so frustrated reading it. So the physical impairment of having her feet bound means that she can't really walk very good on her own. She at home used a cane a lot when she's taken in to be a pilot. When she is eventually, she's not really, she like gives herself up, so she's not really sold. But once she goes into becoming a pilot, they don't really let her use the cane, so she's constantly in pain because when your feet are bound, essentially they're constantly broken, the bones in your feet. So you just constantly see her mention how much pain she is in. So you see the physical limitations, and the like second main limitation that she has to face is female pilots, or otherwise known as concubine pilots for a lot of them, are just sources of energy for the male pilots that they will be in this essentially mech to fight against these alien creatures. So the whole thing is surrounding yin and yang for these mechs, and you need a yin and a yang pilot, and it's fueled by spiritual pressure. Everyone has their own amount of spiritual pressure when they're, I guess, born and when they grow up, and it's tested, and most of the time women will have a lot lower spiritual pressure. So when they are put in the mech with the higher spiritual pressure guy, a lot of the times they will actually end up dying during battle. And so this leads to society just selling their daughters away and trying to get compensation money for their daughters who die in battle. They don't really care. It's just a very bad look on society that views women as simply a resource. So if the title remains the same as what I have written now, it's powered by rage, and it's just female rage. That's this entire book. That is the embodiment of the MC. So a lot of the comments that I had read about the book really actually disliked how angry the female protagonist was in this book, and how it read like a female power fantasy, and they were just like really downplaying the way that the female protagonist was really upset and wanted to change society and change how the piloting system worked. But then a lot of people also pointed out it's basically reading reverse as the male power fantasies of like a lot of shonen anime. So there really was nothing to criticize about it just being a power fantasy for someone. It's just not what we usually see. We have a girl who her entire trajectory of life now is to destroy the piloting system that dooms women and essentially killed her sister. And also, her first step was to avenge her dead sister, who was killed by one of the top male pilots outside of battle. And so her main goal is to eliminate all of that. Now, the beginning is a lot of setup, like most books are, and I really didn't get invested until the introduction of, and bear with me, I watched a video of the author pronouncing the names. I'm gonna try my best. 𝕬𝕚𝕟𝕕, who is the male pilot of the Vermilion Bird, who 𝕬𝕚𝕟 is paired with, the main MC. And 𝕬𝕚𝕟 is not one of the normal pilots. He is actually a prisoner who was plucked from death row after he murdered his entire family. So he seems like a very brutal, cold person. When she meets him, he is bag over head, jumpsuit, guards pointing guns at his head, forcing him into the bird. And when they both survive everything, they get a really bad transformation during battle, but that proves that there is something that they can work with. And so when they're brought in, like, you see that he's essentially like this alcoholic, and like everything is pointing to this being like a not nice dude. And then of course we get the trope built in for him that he's like, he looks like a bad guy, but he's actually like a teddy bear, because then you learn he actually went to school and was trying to be like a really good student. He wanted to do something with his life that was like really good. He like was defending girls who were being harassed, and that actually ended up leading to him murdering his family because his brother didn't like that he defended a girl who was nice to him against some of the brother's friends, and the brother ended up assaulting the girl. And so 𝕬𝕚𝕟 ended up murdering his brother, and his family didn't like that, and so he ended up having to murder the family. Honestly, in that society, we're just gonna say whatever goes. So you see that he actually just wasn't this psycho murderer. He had, in my opinion, a valid reason. His brother was a piece of shit. We have that. We have his alcoholism wasn't self-induced because he was grieving the loss of his like true match, like we thought. No, he was actually force-fed alcohol by this really terrible strategist. And so they basically just needed to make him become an alcoholic to control him better. And just all this stuff comes out to where he's actually a good guy. He wasn't glaring at people, he just needed glasses, just stuff like that. And so when all that stuff comes out is when I was actually starting to get invested in the story, because I was like, okay, the first guy who I thought maybe would turn around and become a love interest, because the only thing that I knew going into this book was psycho female protagonist and polyamorous love triangle. That's all I knew. And so I thought, oh my god, the first guy, he was framed and they're gonna find her sister's killer and all of that. I was very wrong. Opposite happens. He actually killed her and she murders him instead. And so then 𝕬𝕚𝕟 comes in and was like, oh, this guy obviously has to be good in some form because he has to be part of the love triangle. And so yeah, that's what happens. And then the third part comes in, the childhood friend. Honestly, I heard the author say the name and I'm not even going to attempt it because I'm going to butcher it really badly. But all three of them become the triangle and are very stable. And so they actually become the only way that the society can fight off these alien creatures who are coming and attacking the little society, the community that the humans have built. So a lot of the training arc that we get is a lot of struggle. I find it more realistic than not because 𝕬𝕚𝕟 and 𝕬𝕚𝕟 have to work to be a balanced match, even though they more or less hate each other in the moment because they're trying to, she's trying to kill him and he's trying to, I don't know, I would love to actually get more of his perspective because he doesn't want to kill her because he's so tired of being the reason that girls die. So I would actually love to see his perspective. That would be actually really fun. But we do see a more natural progression of them learning how to work together better, and eventually through the power of figure skating, which I cannot imagine how painful that was for Zetien on bound feet. But eventually they start working better together, and they find their missing piece for the childhood friend to be in their little triangle, and everything seems to be going good. They are now able to start making preparations for a counterattack against the alien enemy. The counterattack is where things start to kind of go crazy, in my opinion. We have the main trio kind of leading the way, since they're basically the most powerful mech that the humans have to go against these aliens. And then we have like the hidden, not so hidden side plot of there is this emperor who has basically frozen his body in time and is waiting for a cure for a disease that took out a lot of people during his time. So we get to see in all of what felt like only like 30 pages a huge fight between two giant aliens who we thought were only supposed to have one to fight against. We see the vermilion bird get betrayed by people who Zetien thought was a friend. And then we also see a very sad time when I was finally hoping that the triangle was going to go somewhere, and we see 𝕚𝕚 die in the bird trying to save the other two. And then of course we can't have it end there. No, we have Zetien finding the emperor and somehow getting him to work with her, and they go in with this like dragon and just wipe out everything because it's like the biggest mech ever, and this dude has like unlimited, unreadable, calculable spiritual pressure for his time, so who knows if they would be able to measure it nowadays. That would be cool to know. So they come back, they destroy the basically traitor in Zetien's eyes. Like, she ends up going back, wreaking havoc, taking out watchtowers, trying to just become like the new overlord. She's taking over everything, and she ends up killing her parents and her brother, which honestly, if I was her, dad would be first on the list. And it basically ends with the weirdest plot twist that, because I didn't really look into anything more than surface level, I did not see coming, but apparently I'm like one of the few that didn't see this plot twist coming. The heavenly court reappears after only having like little like dabbles of the gods being a thing, and apparently they have taken Ximen's body, and they contact her and is like, hey, plot twist, this isn't your world, you're actually the aliens here. We have Ximen, now you get to be the new sages. You now get to do our bidding for us. And it sounds like if she does their bidding for them, then they will get Ximen back, and apparently they can, like, they're gods, I guess they can bring him back from the dead, because they literally watched him die. And so we got that crazy plot twist, and then the book ends, and now I have to wait until, I believe it's next year now, or is it this year? I don't know, but when Heavenly Tyrant comes out, we will see what happens, and I'm actually really looking forward to that, because after finishing this book and looking back on it, I do have a lot of questions that I hope can be answered in the next book. And so one thing that I hope is built upon in the sequel is the world building. So for Iron Widow, in my opinion, it's really, like, it's character driven and the world building is kind of lacking. I wish that we would have gotten more knowledge on the world. I think we do get enough, since it's like we get enough to build on and we get the characters like driving the plot line. I just really like a lot of world building in my stories that I read, so that is a like personal like bias thing that I just would personally really like to see. And one thing that I'm really confused on is, so throughout the book we get essentially 3 different spiritual pressure ratings from Zetien. In the beginning we see her reading in, I think, the 600s, and then we see her matching Yangguang in the first mech that she's in at like 10,000. She's matching him, and that's how she overpowers him. So it's at least to 10k for her spiritual pressure, which is a huge jump. And then when she's with 𝔽𝕚𝕟, they say that they like maxed out at like 18k. And so I'm just wondering how the spiritual pressure actually works, because we don't get a whole lot of explanation. It's just kind of like your innate spiritual pressure. It differs between everyone. I would love to know how she got like those 3 different ratings. Does she unlock something through the process? Was it just the reading was wrong? Like, that's something that I'm really curious about, and I would love if they would explain that a little bit more in the second book. So my like biggest disappointment in this book was, like I said, my push to read it was the second part being a polyamorous love triangle, and I'm just like, oh, that's really interesting. Now the girl doesn't have to pick between one of the guys. I would love to read something like that. And I feel like nothing is done with the triangle. I'm like, I was so sad. I was so prepared for like tension and like resolution and all this stuff, and I didn't really get any of that, and I was like super sad. So I feel like 𝕬𝕚𝕟 has like no chemistry with, like, I guess she has some chemistry with 𝔽𝕚𝕟, but I feel like she doesn't have a whole lot of chemistry with 𝔽𝕚𝕟, and that made me like really sad, because like she seems so not really cold, but that's the best description I have at the moment. She seems like really cold to them. She warms up more to 𝔽𝕚𝕟, obviously, after he's like adapted into like the group, and she doesn't have to like worry about him anymore. But like I wanted more. Like we get more chemistry from the guys. Like they each get like one of their like fleshy moments with each other, and then like a whole like confession scene with a kiss and everything, and they have more chemistry in like 3 scenes than she has with both of them combined throughout the entire book. And there's nothing wrong with it being like a super subplot. I actually prefer romances to be subplots instead of like shoved into the main plot. All for that. Actually prefer that. I just, since I was pitched this book with that being one of the main things, I just wish it wasn't, because it made me expect more. So that is completely my own thing. I just would have loved to seen it more, because that's a concept that I personally want to read more, instead of having the girl choose one or the other. So that's just me. Maybe in the sequel we'll get more when they get 𝔽𝕚𝕟 back eventually, because like that's gonna happen. Maybe in the next book we will get more of that, and maybe this was just the building blocks for it. Who knows? So one comment that I read did bring up a good question, but I kind of have like my own interpreted answer for it, and that was, how is 𝕬𝕚𝕟 like so angry at the society that she was built in when no one else seems to be? Like if you look at the other like true match women that she talks to, they all seem really fine with everything. You have one that seems to like go with her other pilot really well. They have kids together and everything, and then one who seems to be more controlling of her male pilot. Like he doesn't take any concubines because she like threatened him and everything, but she doesn't really try to control him, so she still plays her role quite well. And that girl is basically the only other one that I see really trying to go against the like typical standards for the women in the society. No one else really does. And so the person was questioning, how does 𝕬𝕚𝕟 have like all this hate and want to change everything, when all of the building blocks of her upbringing were designed to have her be in this mental state of, this is how things are, this is your role in society. And my own self put together answer is she's a psychopath. And I love that she's a psychopath. That was one of the first things that was pitched to me that made me want to read this book. I just love reading unhinged like main characters for some reason. Because you never know what they're gonna do, because they're psychopaths. They're not gonna take the moral high ground, and if they're like really unhinged, they're not always gonna do the psycho thing. Like you never know which way they're gonna fall, and personally I really love that because it builds suspense. So my little put together answer is she's a psychopath, and she was a psychopath since she was born, and that's how she gets to be this way, to where she sees like the sister she cares really deeply for just murdered and nothing happens. None of her family really talk about it. They don't really mourn her. So of course, if you're a psychopath, you don't want to just be fodder for an army, and you see that could totally be a launch point to completely want to go through and overthrow something. So that is why I think that she is totally psycho and doesn't trust anyone. And I think her not trusting someone, like anybody, is the reason why she, even to the other women, doesn't seem really to want to get along with them for her own sake. She really only wants to get along with the other like high-ranking female pilots due to they can help her in the end if they get close. So I just think she's unhinged and she's psychotic, and that's like why she does what she does. I think that answers the question that I saw a lot of people have, like, why is she so different? So I actually didn't know before downloading this book on my Kindle to read that it was actually a YA. For some reason I thought it was like a new adult sci-fi book. So after reading it and then realizing it was a YA, it makes a lot more sense for the writing, because like for any of like the intimate scenes, it like fades to black and it does that stuff, and like it doesn't like touch a whole lot on certain things, and that might also be the limitation on the triangle and everything. So that makes a lot more sense now. And so definitely, if you want to read this, go in knowing that it's a YA book, so the writing is going to be more YA. It's not going to be like super in-depth. It's not going to be written like an adult fiction. It's not adult sci-fi, because knowing that, I actually think it's rated a bit higher for me, because if I went in and this was like adult sci-fi, I would be a bit sad because of the things, but if the elements in it fit its genre quite well, in my opinion. So I think that this book, just simply put, does a really good job at giving us, what even did I put? A fun power fantasy driven by a girl's rage against a system set up to sacrifice her. Like, that's all it is. It's a female power fantasy fueled by rage against a system that is literally set up to sacrifice her life for the ease of men. Because literally in the book, it said, well, why would people sign up to be pilots if they are fearing their co-pilot? And Satien rebels with, you don't think women are afraid because they know that they're going to die. And then he counters with, well, we can't risk the men dying. Who's going to send their son if they're going to get sacrificed by a girl? So it really is just like in your face, like, look at society, because it's not this extreme, but in certain societies around the world, a lot of the core concepts are still there. So I think at the surface, it's a very good book. I do wish some of the things were a bit more fleshed out, like the world building and some of the characters, but we have an entire second book that all of that can be, worked through in the end. So I am actually really excited to read Heavenly Tyrant, and also because I believe this is a duology. That should be the last one. If it's not, if it's like a trilogy or something, can someone let me know? Because I'm going into this thinking it's a duology. So that's really my thoughts. I thought this was a good book. I think I gave it like a 3.75, I think. I thought it was really good. Like, I wanted more, so hopefully with the second book, it can get like a 4.5. But I did recommend this to my roommate as just like, it's super angry. MC is a psycho. You're gonna enjoy it. So I have recommended this book. But do go in knowing that is a YA. Know that the romance isn't like a huge part. But yeah, so that's basically the end of my review of Iron Widow. If you've read this book, please leave in the comments what you thought of it. Do you agree with what I said? Do you disagree? Do you want to bring up parts that I left out? Because obviously there's a lot in the book that I can't go into detail on for what I'm trying to be a 15 to 20 minute video. There's of course a lot more stuff that happens that I'm sure some people would be like, oh my god, you forgot this part, like how could you not talk about this part? So drop that in the comments if you have parts that you thought were like really good. Drop in parts if you think were really bad and didn't make sense. Like, I love to read people's opinions on stuff that I've taken in. So that'll be it for this video. Thank you for all of you who showed up. I hope that if you made it this far, you at least got something out of it, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.